Ladies and gentlemen, I am the American SpyFox. Welcome to the channel. Recently, I found an old letter, a letter from Krist Novaselic and Dave Grohl to all Nirvana fans. It was written in 2001, in which they were trying to explain the struggles they were having with Courtney Love. I've often wondered who owns Nirvana, who obtained what after Kurt's death, who sold what, how much money's involved, and that's kind of what this video is all about. We go into the letter from Krist and Dave and see what they have to say. We look into Courtney, we look a little bit into Frances Bean and her inheritance, and see how Courtney's actions affected everybody around her, including her own daughter's inheritance. There will be a part 2 of this video, which we focus more on Frances Bean, her marriage, and some supposed crimes that went on after the divorce. So we're going to start from the beginning, back after Kurt's death. Let's do it. First, I wanted to know how Nirvana was divvied up before Kurt died, and Dave Grohl and Krist Novaselic tell us in their letter to fans how decisions were made, how money was divided. When Kurt was alive, Nirvana was an equal partnership of the three of us. After Kurt's death in 1994, the partnership continued and we fulfilled what we saw as our obligation to preserve the legacy of Nirvana's music. We oversaw the releases of Live in New York and From the Muddy Banks of the Wishkah, both of which were critical and commercial successes. We enhanced rather than exploited the memory and image of Nirvana. What Krist and Dave are referring to is Kurt Cobain's legacy, Kurt Cobain's memory. So when Kurt was alive, they made decisions equally. They were a partnership. So what happens after Kurt's death? Courtney, because there's no will saying otherwise, because Rosemary Carroll, Kurt Cobain's attorney, did not do what he asked her to do, which is something that's going to come up in the next Nirvana series video. Why did Kurt Cobain call Rosemary Carroll from Europe, ask Rosemary Carroll to make a new will excluding Courtney Love from his possessions, from any inheritance, and Rosemary Carroll never did that? Well, you're his attorney, he pays you, he asked you to do a job, why did you never type up that will? That's a question I would love to ask Rosemary Carroll. And I know I'm getting a little off topic, but just to clear this up, Soaked in Bleach had it wrong.
And she said about that same time, Kurt had called her also and asked her if she could have Courtney's name taken out of the will.
There's some misinformation out there about Kurt's will. Kurt Cobain never had a will. He was a young guy. He wasn't expecting to die. What he asked Rosemary Carroll to do is develop a will that made sure Courtney Love was excluded should he happen to die. And that's pretty revealing to me. Perhaps he was in fear for his life and wanted to ensure that this one person didn't get any of his stuff. When people die without having a will, we have laws that tell us what to do with their stuff, and the spouse is always first. This is how Courtney Love comes into this equation. Kurt dies before he can ever sign any such will. As far as we know, she never typed it up, or if she did, he didn't sign it before he died. Anyway, I digress. After Kurt's death, Krist and Dave go on to tell us in this letter, in September 1997, we decided to set down some rules by which we could make decisions together. We formed Nirvana LLC, Limited Liability Corporation. Now, what a limited liability corporation does is it limits the liability of the owners from debt, from being sued. It's a simpler way of managing a company. We formed Nirvana LLC with equal representation from Dave, Krist, and the Cobain estate, ultimately represented by Courtney. Our agreement is structured so that each of the members can voice his or her opinion on any matter. Courtney's interest in the LLC is that of representative of the estate of Kurt Cobain. They even go on to say right here, our agreement has served all three parties well. Because Courtney is Kurt Cobain's spouse, she is first in line to become executor of the estate, manager of the estate, ultimately represent the estate, whatever you want to call it. Because Courtney is first in line and she's not going to pass it along, because Frances is underage, Courtney becomes the manager of the Kurt Cobain estate. They continue this partnership. Basically, in the eyes of the law, Courtney Love is now Kurt Cobain. And these things take time. So after Kurt died, it would have taken a long time, possibly a year or two, to even get in court. This is why the LLC isn't formed until 3 years after his death. The wheels of justice are slow, even in probate court. Dave, Krist, and Courtney made decisions together. They didn't argue. They got along fine. In 1998, the three of them even sign a contract together, mutually, everybody in agreement, with Geffen Records to release a box set with a previously unreleased track. Surprisingly, after Kurt's death in the late 90s, Dave, Krist, and Courtney managed Nirvana together harmoniously. Courtney's not causing any problems. Interesting enough, this is a sober period for Courtney Love. Courtney Love has scored a role in The People vs. Larry Flynt, which we've talked about before on the channel. Director Milos Forman tells Courtney Love that he will refuse to allow her in this starring role if she is not sober. He even goes as far as to giving her urine screens damn near daily.
Courtney was after the role of Larry Flynt's wife, Althea, a stripper and drug addict who contracts AIDS.
Courtney came for an interview. She entered the room, she was high as a kite.
When Columbia execs initially said no, two-time Academy Award-winning director Milos Forman took out $1 million insurance policy on her that included regular drug testing.
I called Courtney and told her, if you'll give me a word that you stay absolutely 100% clean and will not betray me, I will fight for you.
Milos made me give him my word. I went to rehab just to do the 12-step thing and do the 28 days, but I never did heroin again.
Above everything else in the world, above wanting to be a rock star with no musical talent, above her love for drugs, Courtney always wanted to be a movie star. And so she listens to director Milos Forman, and she stays sober. During this time, during the recording of The People vs. Larry Flynt, she becomes friendly with co-star Edward Norton.
Is seeing Edward Norton as Alan Isaacman and your generosity toward his work when you talked about his ethics and his integrity, and you said that he transcends virtually everybody I have met in the entertainment business.
Yeah, I think he's a great actor, and he's a really nice guy. Really nice guy.
Immediately following the movie, they even begin dating, and Courtney tells us a little bit about their relationship and how much love she had for Edward Norton, how much respect she had for Norton, that she even quit smoking cigarettes.
Courtney moved to Los Angeles with daughter Frances and began dating Larry Flynt co-star Edward Norton.
Edward was a solid, good guy. He's very much into character. We did a lot of character building.
Courtney's relationship with Edward Norton was probably the greatest, most stabilizing influence in her life, and was great for Frances and was great for anybody around Courtney at the time,
including Krist Novaselic and Dave Grohl. As Courtney said, Edward Norton was all about character building, pride, integrity, morals, ethics. He didn't even smoke cigarettes. Pretty sure Edward Norton was educated at Yale. Norton rubs off on Courtney, which makes it easier for other people who have to deal with Courtney. Now, what happens in 1998? Edward Norton leaves Courtney Love. Not having any more incentive to stay sober, Courtney goes back to the drugs. Frances Bean tells us that when her mother is sober, she's the most loving, caring woman you could ever meet. But when she's on drugs, she's a maniac. So what we have here is a sober period. From 96 to 98, Courtney is not doing drugs, and therefore she is rational. She is reasonable, and Dave and Krist can talk to her. They can make decisions together. As soon as she goes back to the drugs, the lawsuits start. So it's around 1998, when Courtney's went back to drugs, that she starts to become difficult, but things don't fall apart right away. In fact, Dave, Krist, and Courtney acting as Kurt Cobain, sign a contract with Geffen Records for a box set to be released in 2001, only 3 years in the future. It would include the single, You Know You're Right. I think you'll agree, one of the best Nirvana songs written, proving that Kurt Cobain was not losing his touch, he was only getting better. Why did they want the box set to release in 2001? Because it was the 10th anniversary of Nevermind, and they were planning a super deluxe edition edition of 10th year anniversary of Nevermind, and they wanted it to come out for 2001 holidays. So come February 2001, keep in mind this box set, it's pretty much already done. They've already shelled out the money to design it, make it, they've paid their artists, their photographers. It's been 3 years in the making. February 2001, Courtney files a lawsuit not only against Geffen Records, but against her own recording company, Universal Music Group. Courtney is stuck in a contract with Hole. Hole is supposed to produce more records for this record company, but Courtney knows she has nothing left. Billy Corgan's taken off with a supermodel, Kurt Cobain is gone, and Courtney's got nothing, and she wants out of this recording contract. So first, in February 2001, she files a lawsuit against Geffen. She files a lawsuit against Universal Music Group. Exactly what the lawsuit was all about, I'm sure it was just a bunch of gibberish saying that somehow Courtney Love was being screwed over and she wanted out of the record deal. But still, the box set was on track to be released holiday 2001. However, in May of 2001, only 3 months later, she files a lawsuit against Krist and Dave, wanting to take complete control over Nirvana. She wanted to appropriate Nirvana and have it completely to herself. Can you imagine the nerve? A woman who never once wrote or performed with Nirvana wants to get rid of the remaining members and solely own that band herself. Now, there's one thing that I left out of this equation. It's around 96 when Courtney obtains 98% of the publishing rights. How this was divvied out was very simple. Krist and Dave would earn all revenue from Nirvana merchandise. T-shirts, posters, keychains, bobbleheads, you name it. If it's merchandise, the money went to Krist and Dave. 98% of the publishing rights, the actual lyrics, the actual music, well, those royalties went to Courtney Love, who was entrusted to keep them for daughter Frances Bean Cobain. During the court hearing, when Krist and Dave have willingly given Courtney Love 98% of the publishing rights, they would share the other 2%. Now, you might think that's a very small amount, but 2% of Nirvana publishing rights equals hundreds of thousands of dollars annually. Still, Courtney's got the bulk share. There is one reason that Krist and Dave did not argue over the publishing rights and willingly gave Courtney 98%. And that reason is Frances Bean Cobain. Did they trust Courtney Love with the publishing rights as owner of the publishing rights? Hell no. What they put their bet on was not even Courtney Love would screw over her own child. That Courtney would just accept the royalties until Frances turned 18, and then she would relinquish her title to Frances. But what happened only 2 weeks after Courtney obtained that 98%? She sold 25% of it to Larry Mestel, who owns a company called Primary Wave. Later, she would sell an additional 30-something% and end up with over $50 million, leaving Frances with only 37% of the original 98%. Keep in mind, Krist and Dave all along thought that Courtney was going to do the right thing and save it all for Frances. Courtney, in fact, sells over half of the publishing rights before Frances can even become of age and get her hands on her father's estate. Frances Bean Cobain should be making hundreds of thousands of dollars a month in royalties today, but she only makes $95,000 a month in royalties because her mother sold most of her rights. Now, getting back to this May 2001 lawsuit where Courtney is trying to appropriate all of Nirvana and push Krist and Dave completely out of the picture, meaning she wants the merchandise money too. Her reasoning was she was concerned that the revitalization of Kurt Cobain's legacy was being poorly managed. Really? The woman who sold him is saying that Krist and Dave are poorly managing his legacy. Within the letter, an open letter to Nirvana fans, Krist and Dave tell us the real reason why Courtney wanted to appropriate all of Nirvana. Courtney claims that her lawsuit is concerned with the proper management and revitalization of Kurt's legacy. In truth, her actions are only about the revitalization of her career, motivated solely by her blind self-interest. She couldn't care less about Nirvana fans. She is using Nirvana's music as a bargaining chip to increase leverage for her personal gain, without any regard for the Nirvana legacy. Our music is just a pawn in her endless legal battles and her obsessive need for publicity and attention. Courtney talks and talks about her valuable career. As far as we are concerned, her career is her own affair and of no interest to us. Our concern is when she paced herself into music she did not write or perform. By her actions, the Nirvana legacy is becoming tangled up in her own ambitious agenda. We have a simple challenge for Courtney: play your own music for people. Courtney wants out of her record deal. She wants a better record deal. She wants more money because she realizes that she should have been patient and taken the royalty check every so many months instead of selling it all at once. It's like if you own 20 houses, right? You have two choices because you can't live in all 20 houses. You can rent them or you can sell them. What's going to give you more money over time? Renting them. Being patient, taking it a little at a time. Or you could sell the houses all at once and get one big lump sum, and if you have a lavish lifestyle like Courtney Love, who loves Fashion Week in Paris and expensive dresses and jewelry and throwing money at fashion designers so they'll give her a front row seat to their next event, you're going to run out of that lump sum real quick. So Courtney tries to use her position as a bargaining chip to get rid of Krist and Dave and take their money from them. Remember, Krist and Dave remained silent for years. Courtney was trying to screw them around for years, and they didn't argue with her. They didn't feed into her negativity. They just kept quiet. You know the old saying, give a person enough rope and they'll hang themselves? Well, Courtney did that in an interview. Courtney goes on a crusade, a media campaign to bring down Dave Grohl. And by doing so, she makes herself look like a complete fool and a complete liar without Dave Grohl ever having to say one word.
So I don't need to see Kurt's face. 3 tears of Kurt. I don't think it would be mean, you know, but when people come up to me and say, I love Nirvana, I wasn't in Nirvana. However, I do own Nirvana with my daughter, and because of tax laws, I have to give the money to the sister Kim Cobain and Wendy Cobain.
Courtney tells us because of some supposed tax law that she is ordered to give some of Nirvana royalties to Wendy O'Connor, who she calls Wendy Cobain, and his sister Kim Cobain. Keep listening.
What I was saying is Dave makes $5 million a show. He doesn't need the money. His mother's a banker. His father's a stockbroker. And he's making $5 million a show. He's in the Foo Fighters, making a fortune.
Courtney then proceeds to tell us that Dave does not deserve to earn any money from Nirvana, the band that he wrote for and performed with, because he's in another band that's making money. She claims $5 million a show. I highly doubt at this point in time he's making that much money. Nirvana didn't even make that much money. They could have off of the '94 Lollapalooza tour, but who ended up headlining that? Billy Corgan and Courtney Love, because Kurt was dead. Furthermore, she also tells us that Dave's mom is a banker, his father is a stockbroker, and therefore he should not receive money from something he did himself. At some point in time, you gotta leave the nest. Dave Grohl is a grown man. What does his mother and father have to do with anything? To my knowledge, I haven't studied Dave a whole lot, but to my knowledge, I believe his mother was an English teacher, and teachers make very low-paying salaries. Kind of like police officers, they do it for the pride, they do it for the integrity. And quite frankly, it doesn't even matter. Dave's a grown man, he needs to take care of himself. Courtney herself was left with millions in a trust fund from her grandparents. Why aren't you just living off your family, Courtney? Because you're an adult, right?
Why the fuck then does he have a Nirvana Inc. credit card and I don't, and last week he bought an Aston Martin on it?
Well, it'd be my guess that he has a Nirvana Inc. card because he was in Nirvana. Whether Dave bought an Aston Martin or not is his business. The only cars I've seen him rolling around in are old dirty Volkswagen vans.
Do you know that my sister-in-law's homeless? She lives under the bridge that Kurt sang about. It pisses me off that my mother-in-law doesn't have a front door in the winter. Okay, her boiler doesn't work, and she has black mold. And Dave bought an Aston Martin last week.
In the same breath, in the same conversation, Courtney Love tells us that she has to give Nirvana royalties away to Wendy and Kim, and then turns around and tells us that Wendy has no front door, her boiler doesn't work, and she has black mold, and Kim is sleeping under the bridge that Kurt sang about. If that were even true, if somehow they were getting all this money from Nirvana royalties and somehow were still homeless, they're your in-laws. Why don't you take care of them? Now, there was a time that Courtney was ordered by a court to pay Wendy O'Connor and Kim Cobain monthly payments, but it was no weird tax law. It was called child support. December 11th, 2009, Frances Bean sues for emancipation. A California Superior Court does not grant her emancipation, but they do make Wendy and Kim her legal guardians, and Courtney is ordered to pay child support. The reason Frances wanted to divorce her mother, become emancipated, and get as far away from Courtney Love as she possibly could is the subject of our next video. As well, in that video, we are going to get into Frances Bean's marriage to Isaiah Silva, the divorce, and the aftermath, where Isaiah Silva falls victim to a plan concocted by Courtney Love. It just baffles me, guys. It baffles me that this woman who never wrote, never performed with Nirvana, still obtained the publishing rights. Remember, she only knew Kurt Cobain for 2 years. They were only married for 2 years. I've been with my wife for almost 11 years and I still feel like I barely know her. They were practically strangers who had a kid together. She was able to sell over half of their publishing rights, obtain over $50 million, and that still wasn't enough for her. She wanted the other members' monies too. When Courtney lies like this, I feel like she gets away with it because people are like, oh, that's just Courtney, she's on drugs. No, it shouldn't just be, oh, that's just Courtney, she's on drugs. This woman needs to be held liable for all the crimes she has committed, and we are going to be detailing her violent history in the next video, including attacking her own daughter, Frances Bean. Then years later, plotting to kidnap and murder Frances Bean's ex-husband, Isaiah Silva. The next video will be focusing on Frances Bean. I hope you'll tune in. If you've watched any of my videos before and you think you might watch another, please hit the subscribe button. It helps so much. And thank you, members, patrons. I love you guys. Thank you for supporting the channel. I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.